it would have been safer to keep it. That's not to say you should. Oh, here we go. That's the hose. That's the first one. Hello, and welcome to my spare Citroen SM bonnet for another public service announcement. I say public service announcement, it's basically just me sharing some of my thoughts about stuff, bits I've used, problems I've had, products I've used, issues, things like that. I run a garage, I run a workshop, restoring cars. I have quite a few of my own. And today I thought I'd talk about one of the killers, really, when it comes down to it. One of the biggest issues in cars at the moment, which is rubber. Today, specifically talking about fuel lines, because they are, from a safety point of view, they are the key component. Apart from tyres, of course. Rubber is a problem at the moment, and I'm going to explore that in this video. So to give you some context and some background, I have been, in my professional capacity, restoring chassis on TVRs for a number of years, a long time in fact, and obviously the bodies on TVRs are fiberglass, most people know that, but the chassis underneath aren't, because that would be rubbish, and they're made of tubular steel, and they were powder coated from new, and of course powder coating, while pretty, is not an ideal thing to put on a chassis, and they don't last very long. I mean, they last okay, to be fair, they last okay, for what they are, they last all right, but there are now a lot of them are at the point where they need taken apart. And so one of the jobs I do is take the body off a TVR, refurbish the chassis, weld in new bits where it's needed, paint it with something decent, or if it is powder coated, make sure it's done properly and with some decent undercoating, and all the rest of it. Go through it, new bits, new bushes, new everything. And one of the things I changed, because it makes sense to, are fuel lines. Fuel hoses and fuel lines. So of course, TVR from new, they went for bits of copper and then bits of rubber hose on the end of them. And there was a push back in sort of 2011, 2012 for the sort of biofuel that would be coming and everything like that. So fuel hoses were one of the key things I put a lot of effort into. And as a result of that, I did my research and found that the spec of hose I needed for a fuel injection car capable of withstanding the effects of ethanol fuels was R9. R9, I mean, there's more to it. It's SAE J30 R9, but the most important part is the R bit, R9. R6 was a similar hose, not quite as resistant to biofuels, and it wasn't fuel injection. It was only rated to 50 psi, whereas R9 I think was rated to 150. Although most fuel systems, will run under 50 psi on a TVR. My logic was that as age creeps in, atmospheric conditions, everything like that, that burst pressure is going to get lower and lower over time, not higher and higher, and therefore it's better to have the wiggle room that the R9 hose would give you. So cars were fitted out with R9 hose. When I refurbish a TVR, often all the parts that got on the chassis are new dampers, new bushes, everything. And because of that, I tell people when they've driven the car away, bring it back in 500, 600, 700 miles. I'll go through it, I'll nut and bolt check it. Things bed in, even the paint on the chassis can have compressed, and you might find you torque wrench and you get another half a turn on some fixings and things. It's just belts and braces. It's just a check over, just for peace of mind. Now, normally it doesn't take people long to do 500, 600, 700 miles. They're normally eager to get back to them because I've had them here forever. And they're back out, they do the mileage, they come back, I check them over and they're good to go. And sometimes I don't see the car again because some of these customers live a long way away and they use their local specialist to maintain them. But sometimes they don't live a long way away. And the first car I noticed an issue with was a Griffith that I refurbished the chassis on many years ago. But the man who owned it was in the Navy. And because he was in the Navy, he was away a lot. And because he was away a lot, he didn't get his 500 miles done in anything like as quick as most people do. In fact, I think it was 18 months between. And when the car came back in for its checkup, for only 500 miles, but it was 18 months later, I noticed the fuel hoses were cracking, which was quite scary. The fuel hose under the bonnet, there are two fuel hoses that you can see under the bonnet of a TVR Chimera. They both come up to the side of the engine bay in front of the driver and into both the fuel pipes. One is the supply, the other is the return. Obviously the supply is the one under pressure, the return isn't, but it still carries petrol, which is flammable. That was a bit scary, so I pulled the hose off and had a look at it, and I noticed two things. The first thing I noticed was that the date was embossed on it, and the date of that hose was not much older than the time of the job. You know, it was recent stuff. It wasn't new old stock or something like that. But the other thing I noticed is that the hose was soft and squidgy. As you can see, there are a number of hoses in front of me, and one of these hoses is probably the hose that was on that car. I think, was this one of the ones? So the date on this hose, I believe this is one of the hoses that came off that car. I could be wrong, and the date on this hose is June 2012. That's the marking that's on it. That is that hose. Anything with that written on it in that style, in that font, get rid of it. Regardless of where you got it from or anything, because basically it looks absolutely fine until you find the areas that it was subject to a bend, and then it looks like that, but you won't know if it's pulled straight. That was only the beginning. Some of the hoses were failing. I mean, this one has been sliced open to inspect it, but you can see it's gone in every which way, this one. Ignore the big slip mark, but that one has gone lengthways, and this one has gone, that one's 2014, that one was made. There's this one got cracks, there we go. There's another one. This went on because I'd fitted a lot of cars, including some of my own, with this hose, and that started to become a real concern because this hose was for sale in a lot of places, in a lot of big name establishments, and some TVR parts suppliers were still selling this stuff. So I went online and I started searching around. What do we do? The first thing I did, one of the things I did was send an email to Practical Classics magazine. Just mention it, and they did. They put an article, basically put in what I'd written about my findings, and they put in an article to warn people straight away, because I was concerned. You could buy this stuff everywhere and you wouldn't know. You could fit this stuff, think you've done your due diligence, think you've looked up everything, and then your car go up in flames, and it's scary. So yeah, I started shouting about it, and I went online and did some research, and my knowledge was expanded when I found a page which was actually based around Volkswagen camper vans. I forget where it was now, but I'm hugely grateful to that page because the information on there was brilliant, and these guys had found the issue earlier than anyone else I could find online. I think it was dating back to about 2009. These pages on this forum. Well, it was on a forum. That shows you how old it was. And basically, these guys had fitted out their camper vans around the engine bay with this fuel hose, and people were finding it perishing after a year or 2 years, which is ridiculous. And it kind of went on from there. And what I had to do was recall all the cars I'd done and offer to change all these hoses again, because I couldn't risk it. And I had to start recording what hose we fitted to what car, so we made sure we recalled the right ones. And some of the cars were coming back with hoses that looked like that. I mean, that one will probably, it's dried out now. But that's one of the key things. One of the things I found, the cracks go lengthways on that side, and then that way on that side. One of the key things I found with hoses, and I can now kind of identify them, hoses that had started failing had started going soft, as I say. Obviously, it's not rock hard because it's rubber, although this one has gone now. But basically, what I was finding was that the hoses that were affected by this were going quite soft, too soft. while the car was in use, while they had fuel in them. And then they were having splits in them. And then when you took them off, like all these hoses I have in front of me, and left them to dry out, they went rock hard, like that. And that suggests to me that the rubber has soaked up the fuel. Now this was a bit of I was confused basically. I was trying to figure out what was going on, and I was having to research into how fuel hose is made. So I'd identified which hoses I knew I'd fitted that were at risk, which ones needed to be checked, at least have the cars brought back in. And it turned out that some of the cars didn't have the exact spec fitted that were causing problems, and a couple of them were okay. So I didn't have to change every single car, although it was most of them. I think I ended up doing about 15 in the end, which at cost to yourself hurt. So I was quite angry about it at the time. A lazy assumption, I find now, is the assumption I went to at the time, but I now look back and think it's a lazy one, is to blame ethanol and fuel. I think a lot of people are doing that. A lot of people are labelling it as one of the issues with this stuff, and it may be. I can't say for sure because this is all my own opinion and thought and whatnot. I don't think it is just ethanol being in fuel for a couple of reasons. Firstly, ethanol's been in fuel for 20 years in this country. It hasn't, not perhaps to the quantity that they are putting it at now, but we have been at a 5% threshold for a while. So it's unlikely that fuel that now may have up to 10% ethanol content in it, meaning if you buy E10 fuel, it could have 5.1% in it. It's still technically E10. And then the stuff you bought 2 years ago might have had 4.9, and it's technically E5. You don't know what you're putting in, basically. I don't quite buy that that would have made the difference. If it was that in isolation, yes, but it isn't. Because the other issue I've discovered is with rubber. Rubber these days seems to be crap, basically. I don't know why. I don't know what the reasons are. Some people love to blame people. Some people love to blame the country it originated from. Some people love to blame the EU. Some people love to blame safety regulations or health and safety regulations or whatever. The simple fact of the matter is I don't know. But I do know that many modern rubber components are just fit for the bin. They're hopeless. Such as CV boots that last 18 months, 2 years before they're perishing again. Again, I've had that. In fact, on my Citroen BX, which at the time had done 17,500 miles and had the original CV boots on from new, and this car is a 1983 car, so those CV boots are nearly 40 years old. When I recommissioned that car, put it on the road in 2021, May 2021, I didn't opt to change the CV boots. I took them off, I cleaned them, I re-greased the joints, and I put them back on because I thought anything I buy to replace them is going to be worse. And the ironic, sad thing with these TVRs, not necessarily the cars we were doing the restos on, but the cars that people themselves, customers, had been replacing their own fuel lines, is that they thought they were doing the right thing by removing a fuel hose that is potentially up to 30 years old, because it's the sensible thing to do, and then replacing it with something that says it is the right thing for the job, better than what it had, and it turns out not to be. And that's not just true of TVRs, that's true of anyone who's changed their fuel hoses. They think they're doing the right thing. That's the saddest thing, is they're doing the right thing. They're changing the fuel hose. It's sensible. But the stuff that they've changed it for is hopeless. So yeah, as an example, I found CV boots that don't last. We had a kit car in, a Nova kit car some years ago. The car was here a long time because it was also having an engine conversion and converted to run a Subaru engine. It was a big old job. It made the scariest car I've ever driven. But it was here such a long time that the boots on the ball joints, the swivel joints, perished and failed before it left, which is ridiculous. It hadn't even been outside. It's a tough call. I don't think it's down to the ethanol content alone, because other rubber components are affected. Now, I don't know why that is. It must be maybe the rubber that's being used, or I don't know. The only conclusion I can draw is that there is a batch of stub standard rubber out there. For example, it's not just the stuff that's labelled J30R9, although it is predominantly that. This one here is marked up as... Oh no, this was a scary one. This was a scary one. This was one I found a few years ago. So this is marked as... I don't even read it anymore. Universal Fitoft Enor Germany 7mm Alt Tilcarburant Universal Brandstoff multi-fuel multi-carburant. Yeah, so some German spec hose. This one was one of the worst ones because this one, I mean, it shrunk. That is supposed to be the same size as this. They're both supposed to be the same size. And it's gone rock hard. Yeah, just split it in half. This is one of the worst ones because this one looked absolutely fine when the engine was off. When the engine was on and it was pressurised, it looked like a balloon. And I took this off and put the airline in it and bung the other end up and just went like that, and it went and cracks everywhere. That would have been that would have blown, like blown. That was the worst one. Luckily I've only had one car with that stuff on. Well, I can't read German, so I don't know what it's. Universal Brandstoff. So there was that one. There's another R9 that's gone. Most of it is R9. It's not, R9 is a spec. It's important to remember that R9 is a spec. It isn't a brand. I have, to some cars, fitted Continental stroke Goodyear, because I think they're the same company, or they were at the time this hose was made, but I bought some R9 hose, which was branded Continental, and some that was branded Goodyear. They came in the same pack. And that has been, so far, fine. I had that car in the other day, which had some of that stuff on, and it was fine. Here's another bit of hose. They tend to have the white writing on one side and then a date embossed on the back. So this one is 2016, October 2016. It's not split, but that is, the writing is very slightly different. This one, it's got DH fuel hose. I can't see the rest of it. Similar sort of writing. This one here is, I don't know what this one is. This hasn't got a date on it, so this could be old. Some of this stuff could be old hose, that's the only thing. This is just a selection of hose I've had that's got problems. This one here is Kodan R6 spec. So this is not R9, it's R6. And this one, I think this is one of the dodgy ones because it's in the dodgy pile. Yeah, that one's going. Don't know how old this is, but it's gone hard, which is what the dodgy stuff tends to do. It's got loads of little splits and things in it. As I say, I don't know what specs some of these are. The only one I can say that is a constant is this stuff. SAE J30R9 fuel injection hose. Put it in the bin. There's another one, J30R9 fuel injection hose. That one is 2014, so that's been here a while. This is all this stuff has been piled up. This is all stuff I've removed over the years that was knackered on the car. And this one actually feels a bit more like I would expect it to. So that is the scary thing. Oh no, it's split. Yeah, there's tons of them. Yeah, there you go. That's the scary thing. There may be someone out there who's got some of this stuff and it hasn't split. So it lulls other people into a false sense of security thinking that it's okay. It's not just the small hose either. They've got this supply hose here. That's R6. Same kind of writing. That one was trouble. That's the same sort of stuff there. 1/2 inch diameter, whatever that is in English, I don't know. That's R9, but that one's been splitting lengthways. This one here is Let's see what this is. Semerit? Is this one of the dodgy ones? Yeah, that's gone. One of the supplies. One of the ones I haven't got here, but I have recently had big problems with, is A1 Marine hose. Same black hose, white writing, bold font, and it just says A1 Marine. This one's an interesting one because this one here, so this is this is SAE J30R6, and it's embossed or imprinted, so it's not written on there. It's printed, stamped. That is a new length for this stuff. It hasn't been used. We stopped using it. I've got a roll of it over there, unfinished, which I use for junk, basically. That stuff there, that's it new. And that is... yeah. It goes rock hard. So that is... yeah. And it goes on. It just goes on and on and on. So one thing you might say is, oh, so is it just the rubber then? Not necessarily. Because this is a piece of J30R9 fuel hose, bent over and held together in a tight acute angle with a bit of pipe. There we go. That is the first time that has been off since 2014. And that is genuinely the first time. And this has been outside. I've had this outside. We are quite near the sea. This has been on a south-facing part of the building to see what the outcome of the test would be, to see how this would react to being outside, to see if it would crack, fail, and everything like this stuff is, to try and figure out what it is that's causing the problem. And this is genuinely the first time I've seen the results. This was a piece of brand new R9 fuel hose. This is the dodgy stuff. Soft and malleable. It's as you'd expect. Sorry, this is genuinely the first time I've taken this off. It's been pinned up on the wall for a long time. There are no cracks in it. Oh no, is that a crack? No, it's a scratch. No, there's no cracks in it. So that hasn't had fuel going through it. So do you go back to the ethanol thing? Well, no, I don't think it's ethanol. I just think it's bad rubber and the fuel is killing it. It's petrol. I mean, petrol kills things. I think what it is, my assumption at the moment, but I could be wrong, and I'm happy to be proved so, is if you look on the edge of, and on the end of that hose, you'll see some stitching. So this hose is what is known as two-ply. It's two layers. There's an inner bit to the hose and there's an outer bit to the hose, and they're made of different rubbers. They're both made of rubber, but they're different rubbers. What you have is an inner core, which isn't pressure strong, if you like. It's not pressure resistant, but it is fuel resistant, or it's meant to be. Then it's got some stitching around it, which gives it a bit of backbone, a bit of strength against pressure, and then it's coated in an external layer, and that external layer isn't so good at dealing with petrol, but it is good at dealing with heat and dealing with oil from the outside and dealing with the extremities of an engine bay or sunlight or whatever. Because to find a rubber that does both is probably nigh on impossible, I'd imagine. I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that's what the problem is. So I think what's happening is the inner layer there is soaking up on this dodgy hose. It's soaking up the fuel. It's absorbing it, and that's causing the whole thing to feel softer than it should do. And what's happening then is, of course, the string inside, which is kind of like cross-woven all the way down, a bit like if you hold up your garden hose, you can see all the cross-hatching and things. Well, that's not going to do anything. That's just there for reinforcement. And then the outer layer of this isn't designed to deal with petrol. And I think that is getting soaked up with petrol because it's permeating through the inner bit, and it's drying out all the oils and kind of elasticity, elastomers and things in the, I'm making that bit up, in the outer layer, stuff that is designed to fight the atmosphere and the environment it's in, external issues and things. and it's drying that out, and that's causing it to crack. And of course, when that cracks, the stitched crosshatch reinforcement inside it has nothing wrapped around it anymore, so that starts to fail, braiding. And then the inner layer isn't designed to deal with pressure, it's just designed to deal with fuel, and it's failed at that. It had one job and it's failed. I think that's what's happening. I don't think it's ethanol that's causing it. I think ethanol will cause other problems in fuel. And if you've got cars, classic cars, definitely carburetor powered cars, but anything that sits around for a while, you're best off just putting E5 in it. And some petrol companies are selling E5 that actually has no ethanol in it. It's just it's classed as E5 because it's up to 5%. E10 means it's between 5.1 and 10%. So if it's an everyday car, I use E10 in the normal petrol cars that I've got. Cars that are designed for it, cars with plastic fuel lines and plastic fuel tanks and plastic inlet manifolds. You know, more modern designs. Not necessarily a modern car. One from 2006, but it's fine for E10. But for the older stuff, especially carburetors, no. And while I think that ethanol, as I say, could be an issue in older cars, I don't think it's the cause of the problem with these fuel hoses. I think the cause of the problem with these fuel hoses is substandard rubber, basically, because I've seen it on other parts. I've seen it on CV boots, I've seen it on gaiters, ball joint gaiters, swivel joint gaiters, track rod end gaiters, and you can buy track rod end gaiters, ball joint gaiters. You can buy packs of them. So if you go in their MOT and you fail your MOT and you've got perishing, split, whatever, and someone goes, well, you can change the whole ball joint, or I can just pop a new gaiter on it. I have not used a single gaiter out of any of those packs of multiple size gaiters and things that lasts. They have all perished to the point I now don't bother using them. I say, just change the joint. Or if you watch one of my C6 videos where I was changing some ball joints on it, I nicked the gaiter off the new ball joint because it was going to be such a pain to change it. I nicked the new gaiter and put it on my old joint because the old joint was actually okay. It was just the gaiter was screwed. And the new joint would have been an absolute faff to fit. It wasn't that expensive. It was a brand that I have not had any personal issues. I can say the brand, it was Febby. I have not personally had any issue with any rubber components made by Febby. Yeah, it may change, I don't know, but to date I haven't. Or Lemforda, or Valio. Both, all of those have been. No, is it Valio? Valio don't make rubber components. What's the one I'm thinking of? No, it's gone. Yeah, so I've not had any issue with those. So I don't think it's an ethanol issue. Whether it is or it isn't is kind of by the by. The issue is dodgy fuel hose. If you've had your fuel hoses changed in the last 10 years, I mean, if you've ever had them changed full stop, doesn't matter what car you've got, doesn't matter when you change them, go outside and check them. All the way through. Check them on the acute angles, check them in places where they're being asked to do tight radiuses. Check them around the joints. One of the things I find is that when people get a fuel pipe and they overflare the end of it, make it really big and sharp, and then they put it on a hose like that, and then they get a Jubilee clip and they yank it up really tight, they pull it so hard that it perishes around the bulbous bit, the bulge bit that the flare's gone into. Anywhere where the hose is being stressed, inspect it tightly for cracks. It's not just fuel hose. This is a coolant hose. It's not an umbrella handle, it's a coolant hose. It's from a Caterham, believe it or not. And this is so new, it's still got the label on it. And this is absolutely, and this is Kevlar reinforced, according to that label. And it's absolutely screwed. They're not that new, they're not that old. Silicon. Coolant hoses, go for silicon. Do away with rubber, go silicon. In fact, you can buy silicon. I've seen a guy in Poland, I think it is, selling silicon ball joint track rod end gaiters, little red ones. That's a brilliant idea. Perfect idea. Here we go. There's more hose here. J30R9. Look at the state of that one. These haven't cracked in storage. This is how they came off the car. The only difference between these now and when they came off is that they're all rock hard. When they came off, they were soft. And what's happened, of course, if my theory is correct, is that they've dried out and they're not soft and squidgy anymore. If you get a new fuel hose, even one of the go-to brands at the moment, which I can't tell you what that is because I can't recommend you buy a fuel hose of a certain type. A, because it's advertising and all the rest of it, but B, because I can't put my name on the line and my neck on the line to tell you to do something, because it could change. I bought all this stuff in good faith, and I've been fitting a different type of fuel hose for the last few years and never had a problem. If you look hard enough somewhere, you'll find someone recommending a type of fuel hose to use. You'll probably even see me recommending a fuel hose to use, but I'm not going to do it on here. I'm not going to tell you which one to go for, because if you have a problem with it and I don't see that problem coming either, you'll come back and get angry with me. But even with that newer fuel hose, the outer layer isn't designed to deal with fuel, because if you splash fuel on it when you're trying to connect it together and you do that, you take all the writing off and your fingers end up black because you're starting to pull the rubber apart, because it's not, the outside of it isn't designed to be dealing with petrol. It's only the inside. So yeah, there we go. A whole heap of hose. Everything's gone rock hard, except the one that was outside. Oh, that end feels like it has. I'll put it back out there. Do another 8 years. So there we go. I hope that is of some use. If you have, check your fuel hoses straight away now. If they're all okay, check them regularly. As I say, the worst I've seen hoses start to break up in 12 months. And I've seen cars go up in flames. Carry a fire extinguisher. Buy a little fire extinguisher. They're not that expensive. You can buy little automotive ones. They're not big money. You don't have to go for posh stuff. Just buy a fire extinguisher. Powder one, something like that, or foam, or whatever you're supposed to use. Look into it. But yeah, this is only a sample as well. I've binned so much more that's knackered. The ironic thing, sad ironic thing, is the hose that I've taken off a lot of the cars that was 30 odd years old or whatever was in better condition than all this is in now. It would have been safer to keep it. That's not to say you should. Oh, here we go. That's the hose. That's the first one. Wow. There we go. So last minute, so I wasn't even prepared. So this set of hoses is all tied together. It's got the fella's name on a label, which is barely legible, probably because I wrote it. And these are the hoses that were removed from that car. So that, looking at the bend in it, is one of the key... Yeah, it is. June 2014 that hose was made. And that bend there, with that fracturing, that's the picture that appeared in Practical Classics. These are the hoses in question that were fitted to that car. That one would have been near the... It's got cable tie marks, so that was near the fuel filter. So it's got that written on it. Burn it after it's off the car. And then this big one here, I don't know what spec that is because it's such a short length, it hasn't got any writing on it. That is solid, absolutely solid. Yeah, look at the end. I reckon the two layers are coming apart. So there we are, public service announcement. Check your fuel hoses. Forget the ethanol thing. I don't think that's anything to do with it personally. And if it is, it is. At the end of the day, it's irrelevant. You've got to check fuel hoses. There are fuel hoses out there, I think, that can deal with this. There are fuel hoses. It's not a massive problem. We can get around it. It's substandard rubber. Cheap rubber it's just the enemy. It's evil. It's awful stuff. Don't buy cheap. Some things it is worth buying cheap. You can get cheap versions of chocolate biscuits from cheap shops, which are nicer than the original chocolate biscuits from normal shops. But fuel hose isn't one of the things I would be chancing. So I hope that is of some use. If you've got any questions about fuel hose or anything like that, put them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. If you've changed them in the last few years, check them. There is a major high street retail store who specialise in car parts and accessories and radios and kids' bikes. and camping gear and whatever other craze is on at the moment, they were selling this stuff because I've seen it on their shelf. I used to work for them once as well. I don't know if they are now. This was a few years back, but it was well known at this point. It had been in Practical Classics. It had been all over the internet. And I saw a pack on their wall, black packet with bits of green on it, and 1 metre length of petrol hose, and it was like that, shrink wrapped, and it was the same stuff. So it's not a case of you're buying it from the wrong place. Don't blame yourself if you bought this stuff. You did the right thing because you looked at the specs and you thought you were doing the right thing, but it is rubbish. And I am now, to purge my aura, is that a thing? I'm going to bin all this because I've done my public service announcement. It is now on record. There is no need to keep any of this. Yeah, as I say, as a quick aside, oh yeah, you can see where that one's gone. That's the one that's got it imprinted in. It was one of the hoses. A car went back to France. A guy brought his car over from France. I did the chassis on it. It went back to France. It went in for a controlled technique a year later, which is their version of an MOT. And it was leaking petrol out of the fuel supply hose, which was using this stuff. It was a year old, and it was leaking petrol because it was the one out the bottom of the tank into the pump. So if it leaks, it just continually drains fuel out. Yeah, one other one I would mention. A lot of people, when we're talking about fuel hoses, go, oh, but I've got the braided Teflon stuff. I've got the air fittings. I've got this. I've got that. I'm fine. Okay. You may well be, but you may well not be. Because one of the issues I've also seen in the past was a car, we had a TVR Chimera where the guy was going out to his car, and occasionally when he go to start it in his garage with a Chimera, you put the key in, you turn it to the last click, the fuel pump primes for a couple of seconds, and then it goes off just to prime the system, and then you turn the key and away you go. And when his car was priming, he could smell fuel, and he dipped his head underneath the car and he could see it leaking off the bottom of the gearbox, which isn't good. Occasionally he would see it stop, and he'd think, oh, okay, and he'd start the engine, because, you know, in fairness, what else do you do if you're trying to find a leak? And it, you know, you could keep stopping priming the system, but eventually you are going to try starting it, see if it runs. And he didn't notice it leak anymore, and he rang us, and I said, yeah, no, bring it down, we'll look at that. We'll car will look after anyway. Lovely guy, a chauffeur to the celebrities. And yeah, he brought the car in and couldn't find anything, could find nothing, no problem. You know, one of those horrible, awkward situations. No, not even any staining to suggest that it had leaked. This car had braided fuel hoses all around, air equip fittings, Teflon, all that kind of thing. Couldn't find an issue. A month later, rings up, it's done it again. What? Go and get the car, bring it back here. Didn't drive it, just recovered it, got it back here, or something, got it here somehow. Check it, can't find the issue. This went on and on. Eventually I said, well look, I think the best thing we're going to have to do is just change the hoses, because we've checked everything else, all the other joints, everything it could possibly be, all the O-rings, all the seals, everything, blah, 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 can't find anything. Let's just change all the hoses. Are you particularly attached to your air equip hoses? No, not really, because it came like that when you bought the car. Right, fine, let's just change it all, put normal rubber back on it. Took the air equip hoses off, had a look at them, and one of them had a small split in it, but you couldn't see it because it was underneath the braiding. Not ideal. It could be split for any reason. You know, Teflon is quite resistant stuff, but if it's damaged or if it's been mismanufactured or if something's caught it or something like that in the past, you don't know because it's covered in this braiding and you can't see it. And it was stainless, tough stainless braiding, but you couldn't see it. And the long and short of it is, from now on for me, I want to see my fuel hose. You see people who get rubber fuel hose and then put braiding over it. I mean, unless you're putting it next to something hot, why on earth would you do that? So I hope that is of some help. If you have any further questions, leave a comment, ask, not a problem. If it saves one person from driving around with cracked fuel hoses, I'm happy. Write it in the comments. If you went to your car and thought, oh my God, I found something, write it in the comments and I'll pin it. Thank you.